The School Safety Free Period. I'm Amanda Klinger.
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger.
And we are with the School Safety Educators School Safety Network. We are, typically, I know the name, we are a nonprofit organization, and we provide school safety training and technical assistance and resources and support throughout the United States and Canada. And during this time in the pandemic, we are especially providing all of those resources and support and training via a healthy, safe social distance. So, thanks for joining us for the live stream. And today we are going to continue to talk about some more topics at that confluence of what we typically talk about, like our typical school safety concerns, and then what does that mean moving forward with the impact that the pandemic is having on education.
If you're joining us on the live stream, you can see how our hair is getting progressively more unruly as the weeks go on. So I'm not going to show my nails because that'll just be even worse.
I don't know if you need to draw people's attention to that. So
well, it gives the live stream folks something to do. See, there's a reason to sign in on the live stream so you can look at our unruliness of our hair.
That's fair.
So if you're in the podcast, you'll just have to imagine it. So we wanted to talk a little bit. We've been talking a lot about the change from our traditional school where we were in February to where we currently are here in April, with online instruction, and most schools right now struggling with, are they going to go back to school for this school year at all? And the vast majority are not. And so we've really been kind of focusing on the moment. And now I think it's time to maybe start turning our attention a little bit more towards where we're going to be in 2021 in that particular school year. And I think the discussion runs the gamut from we won't be back in session in September of 20. We'll still be teaching online, all the way to it'll be business as usual in September of 2020, where we'll be doing everything just like we did in September of 2019. And as in the case in most things, pandemic related, we have no idea. And as the case in most things, maybe the answer is going to be somewhere right there in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where we want to go today.
And, if you are just joining us, I would encourage you to maybe pause. And we did a webinar and where we talked specifically about some of these concerns. And in that webinar, we really talked about the specific framing of when we talk about what happens in the fall, or when we talk about what happens next, we have to say it's what happens next, because it's not going to be back to school. It's not going to be a return to normal. And if what we're trying to do is just reconstruct everything exactly as it was, we're going to come up short and we're going to be disappointed. So instead of mourning that as a loss, we need to see it as an opportunity. And so we talk about that at length in the webinar. So that might be something to check out as well.
Yeah, because I think this whole conversation of, we want to go back to the way school was, and our theme has been ongoing, we want to get back to the way school should be. And so that's really kind of the ongoing thread that we're sort of talking about. So today, in the short time we have together, I wanted to talk a little bit about 5 things, and I have a bonus, 5 things that I think we typically do in school that we need to kind of think about through this new lens of the way things should be, as opposed to the way things were, mm-hmm. or the way things have to be because of the pandemic. And so I just want to kind of run through those. And probably the one that's, I think, the most broad-based is this notion that we used to have of schools being essentially a light switch. And I'm using that analogy because we've seen that in a lot of the post-pandemic discussions. We used to think of school as a light switch. Either we had school or we didn't. So we had school and we were all in school and we all were sitting there doing our thing, or we had a snow day or whatever it was, or a holiday, and we didn't have school and no education took place. So it became sort of this all or nothing proposition. And so one of the things that I think schools are going to need to do different in a global sense is to consider schools as the dimmer switch that we've heard, Dr. Acton here in Ohio talk about, that where we go from one situation to another with a sliding sort of scale where we're phasing in, as opposed to just saying either we have school like we used to, or we don't have school whatsoever and no education takes place. So that's kind of the overarching first thing that I think we need to think about. Do you want to say anything about that before I
Yeah,
push on?
and that goes to that is the case for, the core functions of the school, and that's also going to be the case for other things that happen. So sports and extracurriculars, and it's not either we have, a basketball season exactly like we've always had a basketball season, or we don't. It might need to look different. It is on that continuum of services, and that's the case for the actual normal core functions of a school, but also extra functions, and then also thinking for school leaders for the business of running a school or the business of running an organization. It's not either we are an organization that's functioning or we're not. There's going to be a lot of in between.
And that takes us as a nice segue into number two. The thing that we need to stop doing is we need to stop looking at, and we have had the luxury of being able to say, well, let's plan for the school year. So we're going to do parent conferences on this day. We're going to do graduation on this day. We're going to have the fall musical on this day. We're going to have the basketball tournament on this day. And we plan out 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years ahead, because we know school is 180 days that starts on this day and ends on this day. And we have this luxury of knowing that this is what we're going to do. Well, we don't have that luxury anymore, or we shouldn't. One of the things we need to stop doing is tying ourselves into the notion that graduation has to occur on this day or it doesn't occur at all. And being able to create or shift the culture that says we need to be more nimble. We need to be able to change and to restructure and to move things. And yeah, we know there's pushback of parents want to know what dates, and we want to, negotiate with the union to get the calendar in place. We want to make sure we have all these things. We may not be able to do that in a post-pandemic environment where we maybe need to have flexibility, and we need to have a plan A and a plan B and the ability to implement them both, as opposed to locking ourselves into a certainty in a very uncertain time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what will contribute to the success of something like that is really effective communication with stakeholders. That it's not that we are having multiple plans for this or nimbleness to be withholding or to jerk you around. It's if you have to know right now a certain date for graduation in spring of 2021, then the date it won't happen, because we cannot say with certainty that when a graduation date is going to be in spring of 2021.
And we can be tentative. We just have to,
right.
I think there's always been this really reticence among school administrators to change things because the parents are going to be upset and people are going to be upset. And well, what are we going to do? We already announced this. And so I think we need to, and I think, frankly, there is a good deal of willingness on the part of other school stakeholders to understand and to go, okay, let's plan for this, but let's be prepared to do that. And I think this and that really is going to be crucial, so that we could have a fall musical that looks like this, but we could also have a fall concert that looks like that. Yeah. And so I think that's really going to be one of the things that we need to stop doing and start doing. I think the next one is really sort of related, talking about that calendar situation. We are,
this is the thing you like to talk about.
I'm sorry.
This is the thing you like to talk about, and then what the head of the AFT likes to ride your coattails.
Well, that was, she copied me on the summer catch-up session.
Oh, okay.
She might copy me on this, because I'm the policy forming person here. But I think that, if you went back in a time machine to 1932, you could tell what the school calendar was going to be. Starts in August, ends in May. Week off for Christmas, week off for Easter. And maybe we need to start rethinking that. And, the dirty word of like year-round school doesn't sound so bad anymore. You couldn't have this conversation 6 months ago, perhaps.
Well, I have a question. I have a question for you, and I have to profess my ignorance on this. Is there a body of research about the efficacy of year-round school?
Well, there is, clearly. I mean, when you talk about learning gaps and how much lost learning takes place over a certain amount of time, and there is, but there's always been these obstacles that currently, in our current situation, don't seem like that big of an obstacles like they did.
No, I guess my question is,
looks more like a molehill right now.
No, my question is it an open question of whether year-round schooling has benefits, or is it, no, there's pretty clear evidence that there's a lot of benefits for year-round schooling, and to this point, the downfalls weren't enough to overcome it, or is
I
it an
would say
open
probably
question?
both. I would say there's a pretty good body of research that supports it.
Okay.
I don't know that it's a slam dunk and that we haven't done it just because we're being stubborn. I wouldn't say that that's the case.
Okay.
But there certainly is research to support that it does sustain academic achievement and that it works in many sort of situations. And so I think that we need to revisit that now and look at not only what can it do for us academically, because that's where the research is, but also what can it do for us in terms of being able to offer or to maintain education or offer services or to be able to do the things we just talked about with the this or that sort of orientation or having a plan A and a plan B. When I know that I don't have access to students in the month of June, July, and August, that really limits what I'm able to do in the remaining 9 months of the year. So I think we really need to revisit what kind of flexibility can we build into a calendar? And can we stop thinking within the traditions of when school starts and ends and start thinking about segments of schools or a calendar block of the school year as opposed to a, really specific definitive start and end. So I think that's one that we definitely need to explore. And I certainly understand the obstacles there, but comparatively speaking, they're not what they used to be.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing with year-round school, and you talked about the thinking of school not as a switch of either we're in session or we're not, that year-round school is a little bit more conducive perhaps to a thing of blended learning where, okay, there's a flare-up of COVID-19 or a flare-up of the flu season. Okay, we need to shuffle to a couple weeks of at home, like severely distanced instruction. And if we have the year-round calendar with some of that flexibility, that I think might be conducive to some more of what we're trying to accomplish on that.
And from a family perspective, if we, excuse me, as we as parents or families are saying, I'm not going to a place where I am in wall-to-wall people, then we need to have the flexibility that people can go on vacation in February. And maybe this other district or this other state they're having their break in the beginning of March and someone else is having a beginning. And so now we're able to, as a society, diffuse the density of folks by not pushing it artificially into, if you have a kid, you need to go on vacation during this time.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to be too, conspiracy theory laden, but I think we do have to acknowledge that maybe perhaps part of the hesitancy to transition to a year-round school, there's a lot of reasons potentially for that, but some of that is, that it has an impact on tourism. And I think, the impact on tourism
there's been something else that has had an impact on tourism.
The impact on tourism has already been felt. So if the new normal is we can't have this high a population density of people at a hotel, for example. So as a hotel owner, would you rather have people spread out throughout the year, or we only have a high tourist season and then we're completely empty the rest of the time? I mean, some of it, the constraints are what they're going to be.
So I think that's clearly something that schools need to stop doing. The other one that I want to talk about, so now we've kind of talked globally, but now I want to talk about a couple in terms of social distancing, this whole idea of, what is social distancing? And I really like, and I don't know who I heard say this, talk about that they wanted to use the word physical distancing because they felt like social distancing was saying, and I think from an educational perspective, maybe we should be adopting the idea of physical distance because we don't want to say that we are going to make sure our kids do not socially interact. And we're going to make sure that we don't socially interact with, or have relationships with our kids or our parents. So I really like the idea of physical distancing as being sort of the term. So, but think about the implications of social distancing or physical distancing in terms of a school. So, if you have 500 kids in the cafeteria, and we've talked about that. We've talked about the facility itself. We've talked about school buses. We've talked about all that. And so I think we are going to have to stop doing the things that are convenient for the adults or that are driven by the nature of the facility or that are driven by the nature of the schedule and start doing what makes sense for us to be able to diffuse that population. And how can we do it in a way that is beneficial to them in more than just a public health perspective? How can we do that so that it's beneficial in terms of relationships and climate and culture and academics and all this other stuff? And we talked about that in some of our past podcasts, but I want to now do a little bit of maybe a cautionary tale of my concern of people saying, well, we can't have 60 kids on the school bus, so we're going to do 30 kids and make them ride the school bus for an hour and a half, or we're going to I just had a school administrator say to me the other day that a public health perspective is you'd have 20 kids or 15 kids in a classroom and they stay there the whole day and the teachers rotate in and out and you bring their lunch there and they don't change classes. Well, that makes sense from a public health perspective, but that sounds like hell on earth from a teaching and a student perspective. That I'm going to be trapped in this room with these people. So we have to be careful that we're not going to make decisions based on just one set of criteria and the heck with what it means for all the others.
And I think also, part of that when we talk about physical distancing, especially that, as we transition back to what comes next for schools, that we set ourselves up for success with that. And I think we need to maybe have a really maybe uncomfortable self-assessment of, are we really going to be doing that? Because, if you've been out in public at all, you can sort of see the continuum of how physically distanced people are. And I feel like the few times that I've been out in public, I feel like I give people really dirty looks because they're not maintaining 6 feet of distance. They're just not. And to keep in mind of how difficult that is and the discipline that's required. You have joked around before about touching your face, the discipline that's required to do that. And I am concerned when we transition to what comes next for school, where we're back in physical buildings, that we're going to, just like any initiative, we're going to start out being real serious about the 6 feet. And then we kind of creep in, and then we creep closer. And then to keep in mind how difficult that might be across different developmental ages. We can have pretty high expectations of high school kids of, really, guys, you have to stay 6 feet apart. How are we going to teach that? I mean, I guess kindergartners are going to learn how far 6 feet is, maybe sooner than they would normally, but...
And do we have evidence that supports that as being the best thing we can do from a public health perspective? Or is it just that's something that we know we want to do in society in general? And are we going to overlay that onto education? If we're going to do that, we need to make sure that it makes sense to do that, because I don't know to a certain extent that it's going to make a difference in some instances. So I think we're going to have to think about that, but we're going to have to be strategic in terms of how we're going to apply that.
Yeah.
So then we talked about, so then the next one I want to talk about is less serious, I guess, and more just observational.
It is the school safety free period. So this is the time.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I think we're going to have to stop doing, and I apologize in advance for however many people this is going to offend, and let us know if you are offended. At least we can connect with you.
I hope to offend you, and I hope that you tell me about it.
No, I guess what I'm saying though is we need to get past this idea, and I'm not saying everyone does this, but I've seen lots and lots of teachers, and we've been in lots and lots of schools. We see a lot of schools where we go through the motions of hygiene and cleanliness by going, hey, boys and girls, everybody go in the bathroom, wash your hands. I don't care if you really did it. And I don't care what you were doing in there, but I said to do it. And so we have this fake hand washing. So we have a lot of fake sort of hygiene kind of things that maybe we need to stop doing and really start to teach that in the sense of how we teach life skills and how we teach other health and safety things. We teach kids, not to play with matches. Maybe we need to teach kids the dangers of fake hand washing. Maybe we need to teach kids how to be responsible for their own hygiene and their own, their own areas even. Just this whole idea that the classroom at the end of the day is like this train wreck, both in terms of stuff everywhere and also germs and all the other things. And then kindly custodian Bob is going to come in and somehow make it right. Maybe we need to be shifting that to where kids are responsible or are empowered to take care of their own personal hygiene and their own personal interactions, but also their own personal spaces as well. Because we can't say that we're going to go 8 hours without wiping down a surface. So I think some of those things seem a little bit contrived, but I think they're important conversations that we're going to have.
Yeah.
And as we've got, a whole group of kids who have been sitting at home watching their mom frantically clean the counter 25 times a day. I mean, certainly, me being one of them too, certainly that's not so far out of the realm of their experience. And if there's ever a time that they are understanding the implications of that or understanding why that is happening, plus it's probably good for STEM, biology, microbiology, all the science aspect of it.
Well, it is a virus, so.
Well, that's what that's what I'm saying. So it's sort of there's a tie in there. We can activate their prior knowledge from being quarantined at home. But I do think that those are conversations we need to have, even to the point of, sports. You want to have sports, then you're going to have to make sure that kids shower afterwards. Or, there's some things that we have kind of looked the other way and said, well, these aren't really, anything I'm going to get super into, that maybe we're going to have to take some ownership of some of those things and change that. So then the final one, I told you there was an extra one. I really wanted to talk a little bit about even to this small things like the attendance line. We have an attendance line. You call, you say, Bobby's not coming in today, he's sick. And then we go, okay, great. And whatever. Maybe we need to pivot again to that from a public health perspective of what's wrong with Bobby. Do we take his temperature? Do we talk to someone? Maybe it's as simple as we don't have a answering machine. We actually have a person that actually talks to them to gather a little bit of information. Is the family ill? Is there a quarantine situation? Do we need to check a temperature when we come back? And take a little bit more of an active role in that screening as the people come back in. And I think that's one, so much of this is geared around, well, we're trying to do this with COVID. And I've heard lots of really interesting discussion about how about if we also are going to decrease the fatalities for flu, and we're also going to decrease the absenteeism for all these other viruses and illnesses that we're spreading around. So this is about COVID, but it's not just about COVID.
Yeah.
So I think that's really something that we need to think about. And I understand some schools have lots of medical and nursing support and other schools don't. But still, I think there's things that we can do to capitalize on people's interest and willingness to work on this particular situation and have that become part of our culture in schools of what we do.
Well, great. So there you have it. Those of you who are joining us live on the live stream, we like to wave. If you are joining us on a podcast and you want to send this to a colleague, you can listen to this podcast wherever you normally get your podcasts. And any of the resources of the webinar or any of the online PLC, all of the other things that we sort of mentioned, and we do have a lot of online free and low-cost resources. Those are all available on our website, which is www.eschoolsafety.org. And you can find other episodes of this podcast. You can find other episodes of the live stream, anything and everything that you're looking for. It's anything. There. We don't have face masks. We don't sell stuff like that, but pretty much anything else we have available on the website. So as always, thanks for joining us. And if you have questions or if you were really offended by the fake hand washing, you can always reach out to us on social media or shoot us an email, info@eschoolsafety.org. And we love to hear from you. And until next time, thanks.